Hello, everybody. Good to see people streaming in. We'll give it a few more minutes for people to come in, and it's great to see everybody here. Wow, the room is filling up. It's awesome. Okay, cool. Well, it's good to see everybody here. I think we'll just get started. For today, we're gonna talk about device onboarding. I'm very excited to see this presentation because it's something that we worked on for a while, and everybody spent a lot of time in it. Today we have Jeff that to do the presentation to go deep dive. So I'm very excited to present this. So next slide, please, Jeff. So today we're going to do some introduction. We're going to mention a little bit about the challenge of the device onboarding, including manual entering the information, which everybody hates, importing CSV files, and why we feel there's a need to refresh the device onboarding application, how we're leveraging the source of truth jobs, so we don't reinvent the wheels, and we're actually going to do a live demo for how it works, the Q&A. So one thing I do want to mention is the chat option is disabled. So we're going to have a Q&A session, Q&A time at the end. So please type in your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll go over them toward the end. And of course, after that, we will do our conclusion and some of the next steps that people could take if they're interested in learning more about either network to code, the social truth, or various applications we have, including the device onboarding jobs. Next slide. Again, my name is Eric Cho, Network Automation Advocate at Network to Code, and I'm going to pass the mic on to Jeff for him to introduce himself and take it from here.
Thanks, Eric. My name is Jeff Kayla. I'm a principal architect at Network to Code. A little bit of background about myself. Was a network engineer for years and years. Worked at large ISP, worked at a few enterprises, and kind of got into automation over time and fell in love with it and came over to Network to Code to just continue my adoption and my own journey. So we're going to start with some of the challenges of device onboarding and what other options there, kind of the solutions that have been up till this point, and we'll kind of continue down the road and get to a demo. So we're going to start here with some of the common methods and challenges that exist today to populate data into Nautobot. So very first one, Eric had already mentioned it, manual entry. That one is the least desirable method to populate Nautobot. It's very prone to human error, requires immense effort at scale. So yes, it works relatively well for a local dev environment. As you go higher in your environment lanes, it becomes nearly impossible to get right and to scale. Next up, CSV imports. So CSV imports are a valid way to populate Nautobot, but it comes with its own challenge. One of those challenges being you have to have the data already, whether that's existing in a standalone spreadsheet that already exists in the enterprise, or maybe you have some other tools that are capable of outputting some CSVs of their own, and then you're translating those CSVs from its output format to what Nautobot requires, and there's some work there that needs to be done in order for that to really be able to scale and to get you to your endpoint. Third one there is device onboarding. So today we're talking about device onboarding 4.0. Device onboarding 1, 2, 3 has been around since the inception of Nautobot. It served a very important focused point. And it provided enough functionality to dynamically get information into Nautobot. It was just limited to basic details. So what we're going to talk about today is how we transformed the app when we went to 4.0 and talk about how much further we've taken the application. So previously, we usually recommended you use device onboarding first, and then if you needed more metadata on your devices, you went to another standalone Python library called Network Importer. Network Importer was a very useful tool, but it had some external dependencies, which kind of made the implementation difficult. It was time consuming. It required additional infrastructure. So all of those were kind of some common methods and some challenges with the existing methods that exist today. Let's go into a little bit more detail on some of those challenges and limitations of the methods that I just talked about. So previous solutions were very difficult to extend new platforms and attributes. That was due to a multitude of things. The original device onboarding was very strict and rigid to what it was capable of doing. It provided a very flexible extension framework, but you had to be pretty advanced, I would say intermediate to advanced in your Python skills to be able to really utilize it and harness its full potential. Some of the other ones like Network Importer, which relied on Batfish, that had some of its own challenges on adding new platforms. But on top of platforms, just general functionality, right? Batfish is a super powerful tool. I'm a big lover of it myself, but the fact that it wasn't capable of doing IPv6 has, caused issues in the past if you wanted to import IPv6 data. And then kind of generally touched on it, external dependencies can cause additional delays that we just need to avoid when we're trying to get up and going in our automation journey. So this one's specifically more towards Batfish. Batfish has a requirement of Docker. And what we've really noticed with large enterprises, not every enterprise is okay with Docker. Maybe containers are allowed, but they may delay essentially the operationalizing that solution. So I'm going to move on to enter device onboarding 4.0. Super excited to talk through what we did with the app and how we've made it extendable and just generally how useful it's going to be. So I'm going to start with some personas. So device onboarding 4.0 benefits extend to everyone. That's from seasoned engineers all the way to your leadership. So for engineers, device onboarding, the new app offers a streamlined process to make it easier than ever to onboard a new device into Nautobot. The update significantly reduces manual work, simplified extensions, and the application support custom attributes, and gives you the ability to add additional platforms relatively easily. For leadership, this version dramatically shortens project timelines by simplifying onboarding process. So it enables you to start deploying faster, get your quicker return on investments, and reduce complexities and operational overhead. Now, if we go kind of towards the other side of the personas, you have your users. So new users, they'll find the new application 4.0, the ease of use and its intuitive out-of-the-box functionality to be really easy to use. And what we really wanted it to be is no need for complex customizations. A new user should be able to go right in, even if they're not familiar with the platform, and be able to onboard devices. And finally, if we move into your experienced users, they're going to appreciate the item-potent discovery feature. You can rerun this over and over again on your equipment, and it's only going to update what it needs to update. It's reliable, it's repeatable, there's no side effects. And again, the lack of external dependencies make it easier to maintain, manage, and control across the fleet. So next, I'm going to jump into the actual process itself. So 4.0 offers two new SSOT-based jobs. So if you're not familiar with SSOT, that's single source of truth. We have a framework built in another Nautobot application that's capable of diffing two different systems data. So we're utilizing that and all the great functionality that comes with natively. So to talk through the two jobs, the sync devices from network is now mimicking what the original onboarding job did in this application. The purpose of it is to get the initial basic data set and inventory item added into Nautobot. It added things like device name, device type, your management IP and interface, your platforms, and your manufacturers. It does that automatically. One cool thing to note on the sync device from network, we do still support an auto detect functionality. So perhaps you have an IP address, you know it's in network element, but you're unsure what the platform even is. Maybe it's been there a while. You don't have your context data to know. It is capable of going in using NetMiko auto detect to figure out what platform it is. But I do want to mention, if you know what your platforms are, you can skip that by providing a platform when you run the job, and that speeds up the actual functionality quite a bit. The second job is sync network data from network. Little play on, a little bit hard to say that one, but this is your job that's starting to mimic what your network importer used to do. So it gives you all that metadata that you were craving. It's in the same application now, right next to your onboarding task. And this one is giving you much more details. This one's capable of syncing in all interfaces, metadata for all your interfaces, MTU, mode, description, status, etc. But also has the ability to toggle more data on or off in your job. So maybe you want to sync in your VLANs. You care about VRFs and the mappings those have, and potentially even the fact that you want your cabling. So it's very robust. And again, it mimics what Network Importer used to do. It just gets rid of the dependency and puts it right in the same application. So I'm going to touch on that a little bit further, kind of in the two steps to complete onboarding. So again, the two jobs that exist today are sync devices from network and sync network data from network. And the anticipation is you will always run both of these. The first job you run, again, kind of provides you that base requirement to be able to manage the device from Nautobot. It's a very great initial first step, gives you foundational data, and most importantly, you have device presence in the system. So one thing I kind of want to mention here is there may be valid use cases where this is where you stop. Perhaps it's a device that you want to know your inventory and you only care about the basic information. Maybe you need to be able to log in and take a backup, but you don't have or you don't actually maintain ownership of that device. And maybe that's where you want to stop. You don't need all that additional metadata. But if you do, that's where step two comes in. So sync network data from network kind of builds on top of that. Now we have devices in the system. And now we're actually saying, now I want to go out and get the rest of the data that you're capable of getting. Again, interfaces, IP addresses, VRFs, cabling, et cetera, down the line. So one thing I'll bring up with the second job is it does allow you to do some data population in a strategic and iterative way, meaning maybe you want to start with just interfaces and their characteristics, but you don't need VLAN data. You don't need cabling quite yet. You haven't figured out a workflow for those yet, and you prefer to wait on those. The second job gives you that ability to toggle on those features. So if you don't want to sync in VLANs, you just untoggle that feature. You won't sync in VLANs. But maybe down the line in a year, you decide you want to do some automation with VLANs. You could come back, rerun the job, sync in the VLANs, and you got an immediate quick win to be able to start doing some automated workflows. So my favorite slide, how it works. This will a little bit more technical in nature, but I find it important. I think we all know how it's made in that TV show, and I'm a nerd, so that I like that type of thing. So how it works in general, both SSOT jobs that I just talked about follow the same pattern. The only difference is how Nornir handles the inventory creation. So besides that, that's the only difference. So upon executing one of these jobs, the Nautobot job creates a Nornir inventory and loads in all the required YAML definition files. So I'll talk a little bit about the YAML definition files in my demo, just around kind of the DSL we built around those. And what those define is the commands that we are requiring NetMiko to run, or Nornir NetMiko if you want to be specific. So we do a deduplication process, make sure we're not running the same exact command multiple times. We run the commands and we pass back the raw data. So the next thing that YAML definition file does is tells you what type of parser do you want to use. So in this example on the screen, it's using TextFSM. That's going to translate that raw output and transform it into JSON data that we can now parse out. So here's a really kind of interesting part of how this is working. There's a transform function to extract the data from the JSON based on James Path. So if you're not familiar with James Path allows you to build an annotation and query to be able to say for this entire JSON structure, this is the data I care about, and I need to extract this data. We took that a little bit further. We're using NTC's library called JDiff, which has our own implementation of James Path. And what that is going to allow us to do is get the exact piece of data we care about per command, per kind of schema definition. So one thing I want to make sure I mention here is that capability of Jinja 2. So within your YAML definition, you have your own context data that you can actually render. So you can see here in this example in that James path, we have IP address equal, and then OBJ. OBJ actually gets rendered into that original IP address that you put in the job form. We have a couple other deeper extensions to this that I will talk about later in my demo, but it just gives you that powerful way to really extract exactly what you want the from the JSON data. So finally, I'll mention, you'll see the post processor there. We use James Path. We got the data we need, but maybe there's some more processing we need to do there. The post processor allows you for that final data extraction and do one last transformation of that data before you pass it to the SSOT engine. So once we have parsed all the commands, each one of those iterations runs through, we get an output similar to what you see in number 7 there, just a JSON payload with everything extracted. And that's where we hand it to the Nautobot SSOT framework to diff against the current objects in Nautobot. And then that determines what needs to be created, updated, and deleted. And in my demo, I'll show you kind of that diff view that the SSOT framework provides, which is really great to see. So now let's talk about kind of the biggest challenge of 4.0 was we wanted to make this as extensible as possible. We understand not every customer only has Cisco. Not every customer only has Juniper. Multi-vendor networks essentially at this point are the norm. So we wanted to be able to provide an easy way to extend this to new platforms where the only thing you need is a YAML file. So that DSL that we built, all you need to do is if you can define a YAML file, you know the commands you need to run, and you can parse those out and transform them into the data attribute that you need. The rest of the application will run that in and it'll continue to work. So Adding support for a new platform is as easy as creating a YAML file with that network driver naming. So it could be Aruba AOS.YAML. And then it knows we basically just added that support for that new platform. So the last thing I'll mention here is we wanted the flexibility to be able to extend the application just via basically creating one YAML file. We also wanted the customization and flexibility to be there where you don't have to fork it and put the code right into the code base and then redeploy your application. So what we did is we're allowing you to actually create those YAML files using the Nautobot core get data source functionality. So we added a new provides method there where you can actually say this Git repository is providing these command mappers. And when that exists, the application itself goes and looks for those, pulls those in, and just assumes these are the highest weight. So I'm going to use this file over what the native app supports. So this is great for adding new platforms, but it's also great if you just have some business logic that you need to implement in one of ours. So you could copy and paste the Cisco iOS YAML file, and maybe your business requirements are all host names must be uppercase. So you can actually add some of that logic into your post processor. And so that when you run onboarding, it will automatically do some of your business logic, which is very, very valuable. So that's how you extend for new platforms. Next, I'm going to talk about kind of new attributes. So what if it's something brand new you want to sync in? I'm going to give the example of software information because we're already kind of working on this in the back end. Maybe you're already logging into the devices, you're already running show version. I want to get that software version from that device and sync it directly into the Nautobot core models for software. So that involves a little bit more. You still need to add your attributes to your YAML definition file, but this one would require some updates to the actual application. Just simply because DivSync and SSOT are used, you have to create those models. You have to update some of the JSON schema and YAML definitions that the application is expecting, just to validate that the data is accurate. So there is 100%, path forward for new attributes. It is a little bit more complicated than just a simple YAML file, but the overall frameworks in use here are used across many of the Nautobot open source applications, so we find it very user-friendly to be able to add this support. So let's get into the demo, and this part I'm very excited for. So to start off, I have a very simple lab. You have a Arista router, you have an iOS switch, you have an iOS XE router. That's all I'm doing here. Obviously, this can extend to hundreds of devices at the same time, but for my lab's purposes, that's what I have. So I'm going to start. I'm showing you my Nautobot. This is for this webinar. I'm just going to refresh to prove I have no device types. I have no devices. Nothing is in here except for two pieces of required data. Those are location. The onboarding tool needs to know, okay, you want me to onboard this device? What location does it go to? And the second piece of information required is a secrets group. How do I log into the device? I need the credentials. Other than that, I have nothing else in this instance besides some change logs from some testing I did before. So the second piece I want to just jump to quickly is just to make sure everyone realizes that you can actually access these jobs in two ways. From the jobs menu, you can go to jobs and you can see these two. They're under the device onboarding tab. And just to show the other view in case you're used to seeing it in tiles, you can see they are located right here. The second place you can access these, because they are using the SSOT framework, is literally via the single source of truth dashboard. So you can see here's my dashboard. I purposely ran some just to have the dashboard looking nice and green. It gives you the history of executions, and that's kind of where we're going to start today. So I'm going to go over to my job results just to speed this up a little bit. And I'm going to just prep my sync devices from network. So as I mentioned earlier in the slide, this is essentially step one. And this is what the job inputs look like. So what do I have to select? I need to select the location, namespace. So again, this is syncing in for this job management IP address. It needs to understand where does this IP address live, what namespace. Provide a comma separated list of IPs. So these are the management IPs of these devices that I showed. And just to quickly jump to it, we do offer a CSV file input as well. So if you don't want to do this like this, you can prep a CSV file and do a bulk onboarding of everything you have just as easily. Give it a few pieces of metadata around the connection. And then we're basically all of these here are just selecting default statuses, default roles for things you want to that you're adding in. So for this case, I have a device role called network that I'm plugging everything into for now. My default statuses are here. So again, because we're creating all these objects in Nautobot, they all require statuses. We just want to understand what do you want to build them out as. So again, maybe for you, it's always going to be planned or staged until you actually do a production migration or etc. Last piece here, secrets group. What credentials do I use to connect? And I mentioned it before, platform you can select. It speeds up because it doesn't have to do auto detect, but because I have a mixed bag here, I'm just going to use auto detect so it automatically detects all three of these platforms since all three of them are different, and it will create everything I need. So I'm going to run the job. As this job runs, you'll see there's some pretty good logging that's going to start showing up. It's loading in those YAML definition files. It's auto-detecting the platforms. Based on those, it's going to determine what commands I need to run. It's going to run the commands. It's going to parse out the data. It's going to pass that JSON data to the SSOT framework. And once that is completed, we'll have a very nice SSOT sync details view of what it did. And the devices will be in there. So you can see here, it is taking about a minute to do this, but it should be finished in just 1 second. And while this finishes up, you'll see here, kind of tells you quickly what commands it ran, what host it was running on, and gives you some good details here. So I'm going to run over to the SSOT sync details. This is a great view. This comes native in the single source of truth application. So you'll see here, if I scroll down, we now have a diff of everything that this job added to Nautobot. It added devices, it added everything that we expected it to add. And you'll see it even added platforms, device types, manufacturers. All this is directly off the device based on how we're parsing the data. So I'm going to go ahead and just for the sake of it here, I'm gonna actually rerun that same job while I go and show the outputs. So this is just to show you that idempotent nature. I change nothing on the network. I can rerun this as many times as I want, and there's going to be no issues. So if I quickly just while that's running again, I go to devices, you'll see now I have my 3 devices. These are the exact host names off the devices. Management IP was set to the location. It created the device types. It assigned the right statuses. And if we go into one of these, you will see it also does have serial number. It assigns the secret group, which is very nice. So further automations, you don't have to redo that. And then finally, you'll see it did determine the correct management interface, assign the IP address to it, and based on the actual status of the interface, set the proper enabled state. So if I hop back over to my job results, you'll see it ran again. This time, if I go to the sync details, no creates, no updates, no deletes. This is perfect. That's idempotent. That's what we want. So that proves that functionality out. So if I go back to my home page just to show now, you can see got my devices, device types, prefixes. So that's one thing I didn't show is we also created the IP addresses. But because Nautobot in the newer versions requires a prefix when you create IP addresses, it's also smart enough to understand I actually need to create the prefix as well. So next, let's go into the second job. So I go back quickly. Let's run sync network data now. So you'll see the job inputs for this are pretty similar. Here's those toggleable options to give you that iterative approach. Say you don't want to do cables, you're not quite ready for syncing VRFs or VLANs, you could uncheck these. I'm going to leave them all checked for the sake of time. We're going to sync in everything. Again, some default statuses, some default namespaces that any IP address you want to create goes into. And then these bottom selections are essentially a filter. What devices or location or role do you want to run this on? So this is one piece that's a little bit different than regular SSOT-based applications that we have, where it does it on everything. We allow you to filter a bit to be able to be a little bit more explicit. So I'm going to run this. You're going to notice this job is quite a bit faster, and that's simply because there is no more auto detect needed. It knows the platform, it knows what drivers it needs to use to connect to, and because of that, it's much faster gathering the data. So again, job results look pretty similar, but this is the awesome part. We had 60 creates, 7 updates. So you might be thinking what kind of updates would be needed. You start picturing when we initially onboarded, we only cared about the IP address on our management interface. Now we're adding more detail, MAC address, MTU, etc. So you can start seeing these are the VRFs created. We created cables, we created VLANs. We're smart enough in the backend logic to be able to assign lag interfaces based on what was in the configuration, assign the VRFs to the interface, and even do tagged and untagged VLANs, which was probably the most challenging part of this effort. So if I go back now to the devices, you'll see these look the same. If I go back to that device I was at before, I now have 4 interfaces. All my gigabit Ethernets are here. Enabled is properly set, whether shut or no shut was on the device. And you'll see if that had an IP address, it configured it. Even better, this one here, realize that, oh, I can actually create a cable. I know side A, I know side B. I'm going to go ahead and create the cable between the 2 devices. I'll quickly hop into the VLANs. So you can see here, VLANs were all created. The names were created successfully. VRFs were created. If you go into those, it gives you some details about where those exist, what devices they're on. So that's just an awesome ability to be able to quickly get your devices onboarded and then onboarded plus get all that additional metadata that allows you to start generating configuration, start doing some automated workflows. So that was my demo from the Nautobot perspective. I'm going to quickly jump into code. So again, we wanted to make this a little bit more technical of a webinar, and we just wanted to demonstrate quickly that YAML definition file. What does it look like? So you can see here, at the root of each of these, you're going to see the name of the actual job that it's for. So sync devices, that one's for the sync device job. Sync network data, that's for the sync network data part. And the way that we wrote this was essentially we are creating the JSON schema based on these root variables. So the finalized data for this will actually be a JSON blob. The key will be hostname. The value will be based off of what was parsed out down the line. So that's very valuable just in the sense of we can start doing some JSON schema validations to make sure the data that was extracted is actually following the right schema that SSOT is expecting. So again, here, I'm just showing you the capabilities of right now, TextFSM is the only parser we support. We're going to add TTP, probably PyATS, a few others, to be able to take that raw data, transform it to JSON so that you can extract it. We can start seeing some of the flexibility here as far as the James path goes. And then even more so as far as the post processor goes. You can start doing things like using your Jinja filtering to start saying, I'm going to get back a list of X. I just want these to be unique and give me the first entry. Or you can do more more customized things like flatten lists, create your own Jinja filters, very powerful that way. Um, Last thing I just wanted to show you here is an example where you might have native support for structured data from the CLI of one of these devices. So you can see here in our Juniper example, we're actually setting the parser to none. And this is because Juniper gives you a pipe display JSON functionality that we can actually get back structured data directly from the box. And now we don't need to use TextFSM or another parsing engine to translate that data. And again, you can see you have your James path. How do you get the data you care about out of that output? And then post processors for doing anything much more difficult than that. So that's about all I wanted to cover. So I have one more thing I just want to show you. But while I'm doing that, if you have any questions that you want to start asking in the channel, that would be great to get ahead of the game and start throwing those in, and we'll cover those shortly. So the last piece I wanted to quickly cover was just the fact that you can sync these in from a Git repository. So I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I do want to just show you how easy that can be. So from Git, you can add a Git repository, and the one thing you're going to notice is these are all the same as the core application. I just wanted to quickly show you the network sync job command mappers. That's where you would select your provides method. So this is how the application itself knows, okay, I'm going to look through my Git repositories. If one of them is providing more command mappers, I'm going to sync those into the application, and I'm going to trust those over what was natively provided in the application itself. So that's it for the demo. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and we'll kind of hand it back to Eric, and we'll start going over any questions that came up in the Q&A section.
Thanks, Jeff. That was awesome. I laughed a little bit because when you say, hey, get ahead of the game, because a ton of question has already popped up. And I hope we can answer all of them. If we don't, please feel free to join NTC's Slack channel. We're all there. We're monitoring. We're constantly looking for, questions to answer. So let's get to it. I did take a peek at the existing questions, and I know there was a lot that was about extensibility. Hopefully, you guys all saw Jeff's explanation on how to extend different platforms for the standardized way that we borrow from SSOT jobs. There's a lot of questions about supportability, and thank you, team, for answering those quickly. And you could get a list of that off our GitHub repository, and these are very expanding, and you could also add to yourself, as Jeff had mentioned, for extensibility. So let me go ahead and take a look at these questions. I'll go ahead and run them down as sequential, so as they typed in. So the first question is from Andre. Say, is NTC discontinuing the supportability for network importer altogether? And will it be deprecated in time, continue to grow, and be improved in GitHub? So did you want to take that real quick, Jeff?
Sure.
Support.
Yeah, so network importer was never actually upgraded to support Nautobot 4.2.0. And that was simply because we knew this refactor that we talked about today was coming. As far as supportability, we do still have maintainers on the project itself, but I wouldn't consider it to be alive for the future. I think the future is device onboarding 4.0. It's solving a lot of the problems that existed with network importer in general. But if there's a specific thing that you're trying to get out of network importer, I would still suggest you put in issues on the repo. We do, like I said, have maintainers on the repo. The project is still alive from network to code's perspective. So would love to just understand maybe why device onboarding 4.0 doesn't do what you want it to do, and why you're looking at network importer to solve some other problems.
Cool. The next question is, presumably sync network data from network works across all platforms. I assume that means, the supported platforms that we have.
Yeah, so we have a support matrix on the repo itself that covers all this. So as of today, the second job sync network data does work for everything that we support except for WLC. That's a kind of a TBD on when we get to it. But Cisco WLC is currently the only one that doesn't support the entire functionality of sync network data. The other piece of that is we are continuing to add different attributes. So I showed in my demo cabling. Cabling has been added only for Cisco so far. We're working on Arista and EOS, but like I said, we have a supportability matrix on the actual GitHub repository where it has green check marks, red X's, and then even a test tube on things like cabling where we've been able to implement it. But Network to Code doesn't have a huge fleet of network gear to test every use case. So we kind of mark it as test tube in order to let people know, like, we would love you to use it, provide feedback, put in bug issues that you may find.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're taking contributions from the community, that's for sure. And, it's a community project and, with us being a sponsor. So we do want to rely on, the community to help improve it. The
Yeah,
next question,
I'll add to that, Eric. Sorry to interrupt. I mentioned how you can extend this and add new platform support via Git repostings. That is in no way to discourage contributors to say creating a new platform internally, it works great. You're loading it in from Git. Put in a pull request. We love community contributions and getting more and more platform support to the community will just harden the project and make the application stronger.
absolutely. So the next question is for SDN environment, do you support collection comparative information about VXLAN with NP, BGP, EVPN? So I think that goes into that supportability matrix, right? And adding more features.
Yeah, so that one's actually a little bit extending upon that in the fact that we don't currently have data models in Nautobot core to support VXLAN data modeling and kind of modeling those. We're working on that already in the back end. But as soon as that existed and the data models exist, it would follow that exact slide of new attributes that I talked about, where you might have to do a little bit of work with some SSOT models, but the framework is there and it's powerful, and adding that support should be pretty easy. Excuse me, should be pretty easy.
Nice. I think the next question we kind of answered it, but we'll just go over it quickly. Is the plugin extensible, as in kind of use my own NetMiko, Napalm drivers to get the information from the device?
Yeah, so there would be ways to adopt that. So as of today, the 4.0 is using Nornir NetMiko. We're doing a little bit of magic on the first job, and that's simply because, like I mentioned, the only difference between the two jobs is how Nornir inventory gets created. For the first job, because there actually is no source of information to create an inventory, we're doing an empty Nornir inventory and creating that inventory on demand. So there's a little bit less flexibility today to use your own driver for that. But for the second job, we're actually using Nautobot plugin Nornir, which is like what Golden Config uses in a few of our other applications. That one has all that already built in to be able to say, I want to use this framework instead, and I need to pass in these extra variables to NetMiko or Napalm. So I would say it's partially supported. We know we're going to get there with kind of that first job, the sync devices, being more flexible in how we're creating that kind of initialization of Nornir. But that was a very large challenge, was how do we create an inventory when we don't have anything to create the inventory off of, except for what somebody put in the job inputs. So that's still a challenge we need to, fully solve.
Yeah, I kind of take that as a cue to, kind of provide more example on how to extend it, like vendor X, how do we go from, nothing to over. So I'll take that as a kind of a to-do item for future. Maybe we could do something about that in the documentation. So the next question is, can I use Device Onboarding 4.0 for devices that already are in Nautobot that may not have all the, the second job, right? Essentially the interface, VLAN cables, etc. Cool,
Yes.
Jeff?
Um, yes, you can. And like I said, I didn't demonstrate it today, but those jobs I ran have a dry run feature. So if you're a little nervous about it, click on dry run. It gives you that same SSOT detailed sync view, and then it just doesn't actually implement them into the database. So should it work out of the box? Yes. And obviously there's probably a couple it depends in there around making sure that it can actually relate that device you're onboarding to the device that exists. It should if you have the same device host name and like serial number. Those are kind of the uniqueness identifiers we're using. But yes, it should work. And then kind of stage two to that is if you want to make sure it works before touching your data, run the jobs in dry run and just see what it would do. And then when you feel confident, run it again and unselect that checkbox.
Yeah, that's a good point. We didn't actually show, I mean, we kind of it's on the screen, but we never just for the sake of time, but you could do a dry run to get a more confidence in your job beforehand. So I don't, I'm gonna read off the next question. I don't really, understand it, but maybe you could give me maybe you understand a little bit better. So how to configure the YAML file to get information directly from REST API?
Yeah, okay. So yeah, it's a good point. Everything we showed today was CLI based, right? Log into the device via SSH, run a command, parse it. There's no reason you can't use another Nornir or Napalm driver that is already doing API-based calls. But in general, we do have plans to create kind of I'll call it a generic API getter, which would the entire framework here is built to support that. We just haven't quite had that use case yet to build for. But essentially, all you would really need to build out is that Nornir, I'll say Nornir NetMiko, but really it would be Nornir, maybe a REST API driver that's capable of doing that. But yes, the rest of the framework would actually should need no changes as far as the rest of the framework working. So yeah, that would be a great one. If you have some ideas, community contribution would be awesome. But we do have some plans on the backlog to introduce that.
Got it. Cool. Thanks, Jeff. Next question. Namespace is some kind of modeling multi-tenant
Yeah,
thing.
namespace is a Nautobot core functionality now. And that's to be able to start dictating uh, where you're allowed to have unique IPs, whether duplicates are allowed, that type of thing. So if you need more information on namespaces in general and maybe our entire IPAM and how we have it implemented, docs.nautobot.com, you can go to the IPAM module and we explain namespaces very well there. So I would recommend you check out our docs page for that.
Yeah, it's more like an IPAM thing than device onboarding, but cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So can the IP field take in some like a range, like a prefix, 10, or maybe not a prefix, a specific question asking for say like 0 to 10 for the last octet, 0 to 8, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we don't have that today. That's going to be probably a pretty quick turnaround for that. We're not intending this to be a discovery tool, I'll say yet. There's no, Nmap syncing or Nmap scanning quite yet. So if you were to do that, we would kind of anticipate 1 through 10 are all actually management IPs that are accessible. Obviously, we have exception handling, et cetera, built in where if it fails to connect, it just doesn't do anything. But yeah, today it's comma separated actual IPs. And again, most likely if you have more than 5, 10 devices, you're going to go with that CSV functionality where you can build out a CSV file and just give it to the job and it just reads off of that for everything it needs.
Got it. So do CSV imported device support individual device types, designated designations, or is it one device type for each job?
No, if you do CSV file import, you have the ability to identify all of those job inputs on a per device, I'll say row. for your CSV, which again, that's what really makes it powerful. And that's really where you start getting into, I know what this platform is. I'm going to provide it so I can skip that auto detect, speeds it up very well, like I said before. But yeah, it is each row slash management IP, you have the ability to fill out those job inputs in the CSV file. You don't have to kind of assume they're all the same.
Yeah, I'm just doing a quick time check. We may not get to all the questions, but again, if we don't answer your questions or we didn't get to it, please feel free to hit us up on Slack. We're happy to, kind of follow up from there. And it would be, multiple people who's watching those lists, and, obviously Jeff would be there, but just get a more prompt answer that way. Next question is there a way to tag the devices for rediscovery at a specific interval? So example, update data every 24 hours, essentially schedule your job to run like a cron job, right?
Yeah, for that, I would say behind the scenes, it's an Autobot job. We are have native capabilities to schedule jobs. You could put a tag on the devices you want to do that on and just say, I want to run it on these. So I will say the current job filter today doesn't have tags as one of the filtering options, but we could add that. I know we have some work to do on kind of all the filters that we want to accept in that job. But yeah, at a high level, you can schedule jobs today. These are just Nautobot jobs after all, and you could run them as you needed.
Nice. So the next question is, how does device onboarding handle chassis-based multi-module devices like a Nexus 7700, 9500? Does onboarding import all of the internal modules? So I guess that's kind of, besides the normal, like the checkbox, the VLANs, the serial numbers and so on. So do we do anything additional to accommodate, multi-chassis, multi-module devices?
Yeah, so a little bit of a broken record with Nautobot 2.3, where we added the data models for that. We kind of anticipate that we're going to have to add those into the framework today. Today, it's just syncing in essentially the chassis hardware.
Yeah.
So any module, SPAs, SFPs, all the actual individual modules for a modular device, those are not in scope yet. But again, 2.3 of Nautobot just came out that supports those models. Now we just need to kind of write the functionality and sync those in.
Yeah, I can just see like it just got spawning out of control, but it's all right. It's reality, right?
Yep.
So, what about overlapping IP addresses with multi-tenant, where each tenant uses its own VNI, VRF? I think that goes into kind of the namespace thing, but I'll let you answer that, Jeff.
Yeah, those ones I think would be solved by namespace. I would have to really dig into that question a little bit more to understand. Best thing I could suggest is try it out. If you're running into issues, again, let us know on Slack, let us know on a GitHub issue, and we'll try to address it. We did our best to test across everything and all the different platforms and versions that we have. But inevitably we miss something. So if there's something that is not working properly for you, feel free to reach out.
Try it out in the lab.
I don't know why, exactly. If you're lucky enough to have a lab.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. Or some kind of brownfield, or I don't know. Yeah, doing the safe place. Okay, so this is a good question. Do we also need the SSOT app, or is it independent? So if you install it, without SSOT, does it also install like all the necessary backend stuff?
Yeah, SSOT is a dependency, so not about SSOT is. But you can by default turn off all those other integrations that app comes with. We just need the framework that it comes with. So it is packaged into device onboarding now as a dependency. So if you install that, it should automatically upgrade and install what it needs. But yes, it is a dependency.
Cool. So next question is the same question, but MLAG, VPC paired discovery. I think that also goes into like the more features, right? So essentially, what do we support? Uh,
Yeah,
or
and
do we
again, I'll
plan to
just
support?
yeah, for time being, I'll point you to the repository on GitHub and really the docs page for this application. We have that compatibility matrix. We tell you every single thing we're currently syncing in. And I'll say put in a feature request in the repo if you have some that you would like to see.
Nice. Um, hey, I like how you're thinking, Martin, because he's talking about new vendor contribution. If he was to add a new vendor YAML file, where should he add it? Like under command mappers on your, like
Yeah.
structure?
Yeah, so in the repo itself, it'd be under command mappers. Again, with that extensibility via Git repo sync, it's a great way to be able to do it and test it without having to rebuild your entire application and deploy it every time. So that's where I would suggest getting started. Once it's working and you're comfortable, I'll put in that pull request into the app, add your unit test. So we do have quite a bit of unit test on this. And again, we're happy to help any way we can, but getting community support and more contributions would be amazing.
Yeah. Also, the next question is kind of related, and I think that would be a good point where you talk about like file merging and all that, right? So the question is, with the command mapper, if you add another command and bring it in, does it merge or replace the app map?
Yeah, so we completely stuck with if you sunk it in from Git, that's going to be the most preferred. We're not doing any merging just because of the complexity that adds. So if you do say need to add one thing or change one thing for an existing mapper, you would need to copy all of the existing mapped data into your file, make your one or two changes, and then once you sync that in, that is taking precedence over the native mappers we provide with the application. So that may change in the future, but command merging and file merging gets very complicated, and we thought this would be the best path forward to get the application out as quick as possible.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of important, but we're solving the big issues first, I think. And like you said, it's important and it's on the roadmap, perhaps future for merging. But right now, just keep in mind, right? Like if you want to add some stuff, you gotta copy in the existing ones as well. So loss limitation on data collection on Cisco WOCs, was that for iOS XE, Air OS WOC, or both?
AirOS.
Okay, cool.
So I would say, do you, I know we're running shorter on time. Eric, did you want to move to the recap?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Yeah, happy.
Yeah.
Like Eric said before, I'm on Slack. He's on Slack. Come join us, ask questions there. Would love to have that correspondence with you.
Yeah, so we're just doing some recap. Today we really learned about device onboarding 4.0, and it's really a big improvement, I would say, on elevating this onboarding process, just to and make it super easy to fill in the Nautobot with these device data. And as Jeff had mentioned and demoed, that these are you really simplify the whole process. And we talked about the challenges of device onboarding. We talked about why we need 4.0 and what are some of the behind the scene work that we've done for 4.0. And we showed the demo for running the onboarding jobs, the two-part process, some of the technical specifics that we have done. I'm really glad to have Jeff here because I couldn't do as good of a job as he did. So really appreciate that. We did the Q&A. And next slide, please. Really appreciate you attending. We know your time is valuable, and we have a few URLs, and we have the like the QR code for demo. If you want to learn more about Nautobot, if you want to learn more about the extensibility with Nautobot apps, and also we mentioned a few times that we really do try to make the docs extensive and comprehensive to cover all these questions. So please keep the question coming. We'll update the docs with if we deem necessary. Of course, Nautobot Cloud, if you feel like you don't want to deal with the on-prem setup, you want to have a SaaS version of Nautobot, we're always there for Nautobot Cloud. And with that, want to thank you for attending, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thanks so much.